because if a higher one was built, the whole city would burn and all the inhabitants would die in pain.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Ride the Bean. Today...
Okay.
Careful.
Yes.
Today we are in Verona, the city of Verona. And we figured, since we have a history teacher with us, we would do a historical tour of Verona as well. But first, most important things first. There's a coffee shop here you mentioned yesterday.
Yes, that I found yesterday and thought that he would like it. So we're going to check it out now.
What was it called?
It's called Garage Coffee. They have a coffee roastery around here, and it's the only specialty coffee shop in the city.
Apparently it is here. Specialty coffee.
And on the door it says, "We respect the beans." I love that. Hello.
Ciao.
Which coffees do you have?
We have a blend or single origin. You want espresso?
Yes.
Double espresso.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, smells very dark. That's actually a really nice coffee. Really well balanced. Probably the best espresso I had in Italy. So how long have you guys been open?
2 months ago.
2 months?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Not the roastery. The roastery was born in 2019.
Oh, okay.
But only online shop before.
Have you been working with coffee for a long time?
In the coffee, yes, but in specialty, no.
No? I've always found it interesting because Italy makes the best coffee machine, espresso machines, but the
no
worst coffee.
Exactly. The same, I think the same. The same.
I love the taste.
Yeah, it's really nice. Is it difficult to serve specialty coffee here in Italy?
With Italian people, yes.
Yeah.
I try and tell the difference between commercial coffee and specialty.
Thank you.
Alfres. Yeah.
Well, this is a good start to the day. If you ever come to Verona, you know where to get your coffee.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. Very good. Well, cool. That was a really nice start to the day.
Yes.
Some good coffee is always appreciated. This coffee shop is just 2 months old, so we were lucky to find it. Where are we starting the tour? Because I don't know, this place has over 2,000 years of history, so I don't know.
Yeah, so the thing is, it has 2,000 years of history, but it's also very small. So all the different buildings are very close to each other. So first we'll take you to, well, the birthplace of the city. The Romans founded the city in the 1st century BCE, but before this there already were some settlements here, actually on this hill that you see behind me. So you had some tribes living here from the 6th century BCE already. But the Romans preferred to move the city center in between the rivers, so it would be more protected. And they didn't use this hill so much. They used it to build an amphitheater here. You can see some ruins, but otherwise they preferred to have the center of the city within the river for protection. And the bridge you see behind me is one of the main bridges that the Romans built when they moved the city from outside of the river to inside of the rivers. Part of it is originally Roman stones, so the lighter stones, and then you have some repaired that were made later in red stones, bricks. So those are probably from around the Middle Ages. Interestingly, this bridge collapsed a few times because of wars. For instance, during the Second World War, the Germans bombed the bridges to stop the army from leaving the city. And then they were repaired, so they picked the stones from the river and they rebuilt the bridge as it was. So now it is in this state.
So this is the oldest part of the city, and...
Well, the oldest, where the first settlers were, but you don't really have traces of them being there. We just know, but you don't really have ruins because there were tribes before Roman times, and it's very difficult for historians to really place which tribes they were exactly. They didn't leave many traces behind. We just know from archives and documents, etc. So the next stop is one of the most impressive Roman remains, and these are not ruins because you will see they're still standing, that we have in the city.
So I guess this is the main main shopping street in the city.
Yes, this main shopping street leads to the Piazza Bra, where you have the most impressive Roman building of the city, if not of the country, with Rome, of course.
So many people. Wow! What the hell?
So here you have the arena.
So,
At the moment, there's an opera festival, so that's why there's so many people, because it's a very famous opera festival in this arena here. So this is a Roman amphitheater where you had all kinds of games, you know, gladiator games, etc. The Romans were very fond of these games. And you can see it looks old, but it's almost original. So it was very well kept. So the stones you can see, they're original Roman stones. So what you see here, the structure is actually not what it looked like for the Romans. And this is the same for most amphitheaters you will find in Europe. This is the skeleton. So this is the basis or the foundation of the building. So this is the resistance side. That's why it's still standing. But around it, you had another facade, which was the beautiful but fragile facade. So you had something much higher, much prettier, made of marble. And you can still see some of it remained standing. But throughout history, you had some earthquakes, some wars, so it collapsed many, many times. And as a result, what we can see now is only the skeleton, so the ugly part, but it's still beautiful. Here you can see the only remaining parts of the front facade, which is still standing. And you have to imagine that it wasn't pure white marble at the time. It was actually brightly painted with some sculptures. So you have to imagine it with bright colors. And it was much higher than this. And you also have something very interesting. You can see the numbers above each arch. And those are the number of the gates. So actually the Roman invented much before us the gate system, like in stadiums. So you would have different gates with different numbers and you could get your tickets. And you can still read gate 67. So that's pretty amazing to imagine that the Romans used to enter here. And now the gates are still used with the same numbers as in Roman times. So people going to the opera or to a concert here, they go through the same gates with the same numbers as the Roman times. So this is used in the same way.
So this place is actually still in use, like it was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. You still use it for shows. So you have opera, you have rock concerts, everything.
So the Romans actually invented the gate system that we use in modern stadiums today.
Yeah, exactly. You had gates all around it because this could contain thousands of people. So
how many people could this stadium fit back in the day?
So this about 35,000.
35,000 people in this place.
Yeah, that's a lot. So what's interesting is that you might think it was expensive or only for rich people, but no, it was actually free entrance provided by the government. And inside you could get free food and you could stay there, like people used to stay there sometimes for days in a row.
How could they afford that?
Yeah, actually, so that was provided by the government. Because it was quite important to keep the population happy. You provide them with games, with food, and then they don't realize if there are big political changes happening at the same time, if they are drunk and having fun. So for instance, during the shift from democracy to empire, you had a lot of, a lot of investments into providing games for people, so they wouldn't notice they were losing their political power. So that's why it was free. That was a very good way of keeping the population happy and in control.
Yeah, that's I guess the same thing as religion did later. You tell people, yeah, God wants this, so you can control them.
That's another strategy. You make them scared, and here you make them
happy,
distracted and drunk, and they don't pay attention to what's happening. They're just happy with the government for providing them free entertainment and food. And actually, both men and women could join. The women had a separate area at the top, and the men had the stone seats, more like in the center. Okay, so that's the highlight for the Roman history of the city. And now we're going to jump into medieval times. So actually, on the same plaza here, Piazza Bra, where you have the arena, you can see the medieval wall, which, well, there was a wall in Roman times, since, you know, you had the river all around the city, and then you closed off the city with a wall, so it was really protected. But as the city grew, then in medieval time, they had to do another wall a bit further away. So that's this wall. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, there were two walls, and this is the earliest one, so that's the Roman wall. During the medieval time, the city was ruled by an important family, the family de la Scala, and to assert their wealth and power, they built a lot of palaces, and the most important remain is this castle. So this is a Castle Vecchio, so old castle, built for this family. And you can see it's from the medieval time because you have these red bricks that you will find all around the city, as in the medieval walls that surround the city. So you have this nice bridge as well that was linking the castle to the other side of the river. That's what it looked like originally. But of course you had many wars, the most destructive one being the Second World War with the German bombings. So this bridge was completely destroyed and it was rebuilt as it used to look like. So this is not original. The castle is original, but the bridge was destroyed by the German army. So they just tried to rebuild it in the same style with the help of pictures and just using the bricks that were in the river, etc. Next to this castle, interesting fact, you have a building from a very different period of history, which is a Roman gate. It was situated at the entrance of the city, so you would go through it with your carriage, etc. when you came in. And now it is here, and you might think, why is it here? There's no road here, it goes straight into the river. But actually it was displaced in the 18th century when the army of Napoleon arrived here, and they wanted to go through it, but it was too small because they wanted to invade the city. So Napoleon said, well, we'll just displace it. But they were very respectful. So they just took away all the stones, one by one, but they put numbers on each stone, so later they could be rebuilt exactly as it was. Because it's a nice gate. So they stored it in the city for about 200 years or so, and 200 years later, they rebuilt it following the instruction that Napoleon's soldiers left on the stone. And thanks to all this numbering on the stone, they could rebuild it almost as it was at the time. So this is about 95% original. It's the original stones. Some of them are new because they were really damaged, but it's exactly what it looked like. They just displaced it here instead of there.
That's fascinating.
And just next to this castle. So here you have something from the Roman times, and right next to it you have something from the medieval times.
And you see the chariot marks.
Yeah,
still.
that's common for Roman roads. This is the very volcanic stone that's very solid, very hard. That's one of the hardest stone. But still you can see the traces of the carriages because it was used so much, and that's really nice to see. Here we are on the Plaza dei Signori, which is where you have the palaces of the important members of the La Scala family who ruled the city and built the castle I just showed you. So they each had their own palace here. One is under construction now, so you can't see it. But this plaza was where they lived. And if we continue a bit further away, you can still notice how important this family was for the city, because actually when they died, they built some very beautiful tombstones with expensive materials to honor them. Here you have the tombstone of the most influential member of the family, who was the lieutenant and was famous for his victories. And nearby you have the tombstone of his son. You can see they're both in a Gothic style. And the one from his son is even more expensive and even more magnificent. They're now some of the most beautiful buildings of the city.
It's a bit of an overkill for a dead person, I would say.
That's how influential and powerful they were. An interesting fact, if you look a bit closer at the fence here around the tombstone, you will notice this little motif or this little symbol, which looks like a ladder. And actually that was the symbol of the family because La Scala means the ladder. So this is the symbol of the family that you can find across the city.
This is the Verona football team has this as a logo too, don't
Yes,
they?
they still use it nowadays, yeah.
So this is where it comes from. That's cool.
Yeah, that's how
Nice.
important this family was for the city.
Wow.
So they ruled during the Middle Ages. And when they died, after that came a new period for the city. So you might know about Venice and how important the city was in Italy as a merchant port. And actually Venice is not far from here. So its influence was also expanding inside the country. So much so that our next stop we are going to see some of the influence of the Venetian age, as we say. You can recognize which buildings are from the medieval times and which buildings are from the Venetian age by how they look. So usually the buildings like the one behind me with red bricks, those are from the medieval time, like the castle, etc. And those with this light red, light yellow are from
Like this?
Yes, from the Venetian time. So that's after. So after the Middle Age, you have the Renaissance period. So the Venetian period was important in Italy because of the trade and the rich merchants. And the houses you will see like this, these beautiful houses painted in these colors, they were the houses of the merchants. You also have the main seat of the merchant guild right there. So all these houses belong to rich merchants that lived here in the center of the city, also nearby the marketplace. This is the last stop of this tour. It's the merchant's place, which is also the marketplace.
It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's a marketplace since the Roman times, and it's still a marketplace now. Now it's mostly touristy.
There's like
stuff.
magnets and shit.
But and all around it you have the beautiful merchant houses, and here you have the merchant guild house. And behind me you have an interesting building, which is just the bell tower, but it is the highest building in Verona. And the legend says that it has to remain the highest building in the city, because if a higher one was built, the whole city would burn and all the inhabitants would die in pain. So nothing should be higher than this one.
Is there any architects who wants to build a higher tower?
Yeah, it's a
If
nice.
the legend is true.
It's a nice clock.
It is beautiful.
One of the oldest clock of the kind,
Yeah?
mechanical clock like this, or at least they say.
Damn, look at that. What is that?
Yeah, this is the house of the richest merchant of the plaza at the time. And he ordered the paintings on the facade from some very famous, I don't know the name anymore, but some very famous Italian Renaissance painter. And the paintings on the facades are still the same original painting from 500 years ago.
That's incredible. The paint has lasted
Yeah.
that long.
And if you walk across the city, you will find some of these Renaissance paintings on the facades. Because at the time, the city was really rich. It was thriving with the Venetian influence. And you can see some traces of this wealth. So you have paintings everywhere on the walls. You have to imagine at the time, almost every wall was decorated with paintings like this.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. This has been really interesting.
Yeah, so we reached the end of the tour. So we took you through the first settlements, the Roman history, the medieval times,
You mentioned the Napoleon War, but
just that they displaced the gate.
Yeah.
And now with the Venetian influence. And then after this you have, contemporary history. But these are the buildings that from the periods that were most important for the city, that you can still notice today.
so fascinating. I hope you guys have enjoyed this tour. I have definitely learned a lot.
Yeah?
It's funny to travel with a historian.
Yeah, there was a lot to say about the city.
Yeah.
So much history, it's amazing. I've never seen this in Europe, so much history from different periods in such a small space. It's definitely worth visiting.
If you enjoyed this episode, give me a thumbs up. Click subscribe and ring the bell if you want to see what we end up doing next. I think tomorrow we are going on a little bit of a motorcycle tour
Yes.
to a lake.
Yeah, too many people here. We need some nature now.
Yeah, this combination is good.
Yeah.
City and then some peace and quiet in nature.
Yeah.
That's good. But Verona, isn't this where Shakespeare, the Romeo and Juliet took place too?
Yes, yes. It's also famous for this because the famous Shakespeare play was inspired by some stories from Verona. So actually what most people don't know, unless they study Shakespeare, is that all his plays, they're inspired from previous writings or previous stories, so ancient Greek stories or such things, where he took inspiration from. But the story itself, it's just rewritten to the taste of his age to entertain people, but it's not new. Like, he didn't create it. And that's the same for many literature of the time. They all take inspiration from older stories and rewrite it. And throughout history, a lot of books are like this. You just keep rewriting the same story, but you just change some stuff and you adapt it to your time. Yeah, that's what all literature is about.
I didn't know that.
Like, even to our days, some of the oldest myths are still made into stories.
I know Jesus is, like the story of Jesus is from the Byzantines or something. So it's a copy. That's the only thing I know.
I'm really not good at religion, but that's how it works. At the time, the stories, they were shared, they were inspired, they're shared orally, or they were traveling like this and inspiring people across the world who rewrote versions of the same story but in a different setting, etc. Recycling the same basic story into new stories.
I didn't know Shakespeare's... I didn't know Romeo and Juliet was a copy.
Yeah, it's a copy from a contemporary Italian story about two rival clans, if you know the story of Romeo and Juliet. And he rewrote it and made it more dramatic and created new characters.
That's fascinating.
But the character Romeo and Juliet didn't really exist. So now there's a tourist trap where you can go to Juliet's house and see the balcony, the famous balcony like in the play. But actually it's a balcony they glued there in the 19th century to attract tourists. So that's really fun. And
I had no idea about that.
You have a big queue in front of it. So, yeah.
That is fascinating.
And if you touch the statue of Juliet, you will find your true love within a year. So now the statue is very shiny. And yes.
Well, I guess
we can call it a day.
We can call it a day. It's been a long day. I guess we'll see you in the next episode then. Peace.
Peace.